welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about how to choose a university. So we're going to go over 4 main criteria. The first one is location, the second is academics, the third is atmosphere, and the fourth will be finances. Starting with location, the first big factor for that is how close to home you want to be. So I personally am in Hamilton, and that's about an hour away from my own home, so I'm able to go home for weekends and kind of spur of the moment, which isn't possible for my friends who live in, let's say, Kingston or somewhere farther away, because they have about a 3 to 4 hour drive and it's a large monetary and time commitment to go back home. That range between 1 and 4 hours I would not consider long distance. Anything over, I would say, 7 hours of commute by car would be long distance, and if you have to take a plane, that's definitely long distance. And there are things to consider if you want to go out of province or super far away from home. Because if you do want to come back home, whether it's for the summer, for the holidays, you have to take into consideration the monetary and time commitment that is going to go into traveling those long distances. Now, the next factor takes into consideration what things are around you. So you need to figure out what you prioritize. Some people prioritize nature, having trails around them. Others prioritize being close to a city or being in a city. Others prioritize things like gyms, grocery stores, proximity to a doctor, proximity to a hospital. When looking at a university, if one of those things are very important to you, you need to make sure that it's accessible within your geographical area, especially if you don't have a car. So public transportation was a big thing for me because I knew I wasn't going to have a car. So being fairly close to a city allows me to access good public transportation that's running constantly, because most university cities do have public transportation, but ones that are like more rural or far out, the infrastructure might not be as good or buses might not run as often. And finally, another really important but often overlooked factor for location would be, where are you in terms of job opportunities? So when you graduate, are there jobs, are there employers around your geographical area that you would want to work with? So for example, if you go to U of T, you're going to be surrounded by opportunity. But that doesn't necessarily mean you'll be put at a disadvantage if you're not in a big city. Just make sure you know where your job opportunities will be when you graduate. So now we're going to talk about the academic factors that you should be considering. The first and biggest one is if that university has the program that you want to enroll in. So for example, I go to McMaster and I'm like 99% sure that we don't have like theatrics major or film major or acting major. So if I wanted to get into those things, I wouldn't be able to go to McMaster because it doesn't have my program. Also important to note that program types aren't the same at different universities, even if they have the same name. So for example, health sciences at Queen's and McMaster are different from health sciences at Western. At health sciences at McMaster and Queen's, they focus more on the scientific aspect of health, and at Western, they focus more on health policies and more of like the social science type of stuff. And another important thing to note as well is, even though Queen's and McMaster Health Science are similar in terms of the fact that they focus predominantly on science related to health, they are still structured very differently. In terms of knowledge, you'll be generally learning the same things, but it will be presented to you and evaluated in very different ways because they are different programs. So the next factor that kind of ties into the last one is how big or small your program is going to be. And I'm a little bit biased, but I would recommend every single time to take the smaller program if possible. And there are lots of reasons for this. One, you get a more personalized academic experience. You get more one-on-one time with your profs, you get more help, it feels much more like a community, and thus you probably will be more engaged than if you were in a lecture hall with thousands of other students where the prof doesn't know your name. Also, when you have a smaller program, it's easier to build interpersonal relationships with your professors, which leads to good reference letters as well as research experience. And on top of that, it's really great just to get to know your professors. They're interesting people and they have a lot of knowledge that they can share with you that doesn't just have to be academic. So another huge thing to consider is whether or not your program and university has co-op placements. I could spend hours talking about co-op and why it's so important. I'll try and condense it real quick here, but co-op is incredibly important because in this day and age, having good marks and graduating from university and having a degree will not suffice in landing you a job. You need to have applicable real-life skills that you have gained through experience. So during your co-op placement, you are going to be working for someone in a way that kind of reflects what you're learning in your degree. For example, I have a friend at Waterloo, which is really well known for their co-op placements. He is in software engineering, and in one of his co-op placements, he worked for Ford. Imagine being in second year university and casually being like, yeah, I worked for Ford. You're gonna wanna make sure that that school has a good reputation in terms of co-op, because you don't automatically get put with like a company or something. You have to go out of your way and apply for these positions. When you go to a good co-op university like Waterloo, the reason why you want to do your co-op at that type of university is because the university has good connections and has built up a good reputation with these companies. So these companies are gonna turn around and go, you know what, we're gonna hire a bunch of co-op students from Waterloo because in the past they were intelligent and they performed well. With all this being said, you don't necessarily need to go into a program or a university that has a lot of co-op in order to get this experience. So for example, my program doesn't even have the option to do co-op, so I couldn't do co-op if I wanted to in integrated science. Instead, our whole program is research-based, so throughout my 4 years in ISci, I'm going to have multiple publications and come out with a ton of applicable research skills that I developed throughout my program. So there are definitely trade-offs, but I personally would not have gone into a program that didn't either have a lot of research opportunity like the one that I'm currently in, or one that didn't have co-op, just because I know how important that experience is and how difficult it can be nowadays to get like those summer internships and summer research jobs with very little experience. So the next factor that a lot of people don't think about until they're in like second or third year is whether or not your university offers the possibility of double majors, several minors, maybe one minor, or certifications. This is important if you want to pursue several different things, or you're trying to be more employable and you want to have that recognition and distinction of, yes, she or he did complete these courses and has knowledge in this area. Okay, so the third one that we're gonna look at is atmosphere. So let's talk about diversity. And when I talk about diversity, I'm not just talking race, I'm talking ideology, socioeconomic status, international students, religions, beliefs, all that good stuff. So with regards to this, diversity can be very important to a lot of people. Diversity was really important to me because I don't like being in a place where there's one mindset, one belief, people don't challenge each other, and people don't really learn from each other. If you're looking for guidance on this as a person of color or a member of a minority group, I'm personally not going to speak on it because I'm very obviously not a part of a racialized minority and I'm not a member of these other minority communities, so I don't feel like I'd be able to give any insight into that. If you want, you can leave a comment or send me a DM. I can try and get someone to speak to you who you might have similar experiences to, so you can kind of get a feel for what their experience was. And here's a big one that everyone likes to talk about is party life and the party scene. So if this is important to you, I would just like to say in advance that at most universities, like majority of Canadian universities, you will be able to go to parties. Like there are parties at every university. It's just that some of them are more well known for having a lot of parties and wild parties like Queen's and Western and Laurier. To be perfectly honest, in my opinion, just in my opinion, this isn't rooted in fact, it's completely biased. I don't think that making your decision to go to university based on party life is a good idea. I understand that it may be a factor for some people. It was a bit of a factor for me when I chose. I just wanted to make sure that my university had a bit of a social life, so I wasn't too interested in the parties per se. I just wanted to make sure that there were going to be opportunities for me to go out and make friends and just generally blow off some steam. But like I said, you'll honestly probably get that anywhere. If you are looking for the hardcore parties, to each their own, and you probably already know what schools they are, so I won't touch on them too much. I already kind of did. But most schools have a party life that is kind of constructed in the way that if you want to go to a party, there are parties to go to and you will be able to find one, but you won't just like walk down the street and see 5 different house parties at the same time, if that makes sense. So another important factor for atmosphere is whether or not the campus is localized. So an example of a localized campus would again be McMaster. Everything is on campus, residences, food, lecture halls, labs, everything is on campus. You don't have to leave campus to do anything university related. So that's an example of a localized campus. An example of a delocalized campus might be a campus in downtown Toronto where there are different buildings scattered all throughout the city and you might have to travel by bus to get from one lecture to another. This can be pretty important in influencing the atmosphere of your university experience because a more localized campus is definitely more of a community feel, whereas something that is dispersed, people might not feel as much of a community vibe, which is what I've been told by friends who have experienced that type of university life, who have graduated or are experiencing it now, so that's just something to keep in mind. I probably should have tacked this last factor onto the party stuff, but there are some universities that have frats and sororities. So if you're looking looking to get involved in any type of Greek life, I would do some research into the school you're attending, because some universities, such as Western, from what I understand, they have sorority houses and frat houses. At McMaster, we do have frats and sororities, but I'm pretty sure they're not actually affiliated with the university, and we don't really have houses for people to live in. So like I said, it varies between universities. You kind of have to do your own homework on it. And last but not least, we're going to talk about finances. I'm going to quickly run through these because numbers and amounts are going to vary drastically in terms of your financial situation, how much money you get from OSAP, as well as the university or the program that you're attending. So one thing to consider is the cost of on-campus residence for your university. Some universities have very expensive residence. In general, they're all fairly expensive, but between universities, there are sometimes like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 of difference. Also, something to keep in mind is how long you can stay on residence. I know some universities only offer 1 year in residence, so it's important to know how long you can stay on campus. And also, you need to be aware of the prices of off-campus residence, especially if you can only stay 1 year on campus. Because, for example, if you're at U of T, the prices for an apartment or for a place to rent in Toronto is going to be insane compared to somewhere in like Hamilton, where the prices are around $500 a month. You're also going to want to compare prices of programs. So you can do this between universities. Let's say you want a life science degree and you're comparing between McMaster and Queen's, those are going to be different prices. But if you're comparing between what type of major you want, an engineering versus a life science degree, an engineering degree is probably going to be twice the amount of a life science degree. So again, something to keep in mind. And finally, another thing to consider is what scholarships that university offers. Whether it's entrance scholarships or in-program scholarships, they're not all created equal. Each university and each program does them differently. So that's something you need to do your homework on as well if that's relevant to your financial situation. All right, that was a lot of ground covered. I hope this video was helpful. I feel like I definitely could have used this a couple of years ago. Give it a like and subscribe if it was helpful and if you want to see more of my content, and leave a comment about the most important factor for you when choosing a university, because I'm kind of curious to hear. I will see you guys next time. Bye!